Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 288, the sequence of the sealing of these set apart ones, part 3. The podcast objectives are analyze the final 4 main events of the sealing of these set apart ones. This lesson contains timelines and other visuals. Therefore, if you are listening to the podcast, I advise you to watch the video version on our website or YouTube, or request a PDF of the lesson so you can add the visual effect. The renewed covenant. Now, in the most recent podcast, we analyzed the primary event of the sealing of these set apart ones. That is the great falling away. As you can see by the timeline below, the great falling away is the third of the 7 primary events and the sealing of these set apart ones. Ergo, there are 4 more events we must cover in our analyses of the sequence of the sealing as we work to prove the sealing is an authentic prophetic event. We will begin with the 4th event, that is, the establishment of the renewed covenant with the chosen elect. I will commence with a point of interest in line with everything we have learned thus far concerning the first 3 events in this season. The renewed covenant is for those, and only those, who are elected into the renewed nation of Israel. Now, this interest point confirms 2 key matters which we have addressed in prior podcasts, and yet they are worth mentioning again at this time. First and foremost, it confirms that the renewed nation of Israel is a purely spiritual body requiring election. And election is contingent to spiritual bases, to wit, a predefined set of spiritual criteria, all of which is recorded in the Torah of perfection, i.e., the Torah of Yahushua, Messiah. Secondly, and in line with the first point, the renewed covenant is also according to election. This is why Peter commanded us, saying, do your utmost to make your calling and election sure. For if you are doing these matters, you shall never fall. Romans 11, 7 through 8 reads, what then? Israel has not obtained what it seeks, but the chosen, the election, did obtain it, and the rest were hardened. As it has been written, Yahuwah has given them a spirit of deep sleep, eyes not to see and ears not to hear unto this day. Brothers and sisters, we are living these verses in these last days of the sealing. The descendants of the former nation of Israel have not obtained what they seek, to wit, they seek the renewed covenant and everlasting peace with Elohim. And yet, all they have found is a curse and enmity with the Most High. For as we learned in the most recent podcast, he has sent them a strong delusion because they did not receive a love for the truth. And now they are living and believing in a lie. This is in line with what Shaul has declared in Romans 11, which is also recorded in Deuteronomy and Isaiah. That is, Yahuwah has given them a spirit of deep sleep, eyes not to see, ears not to hear, unto this day. My dear friends, this is the case for those who are in the extended nation of Israel, and yet were never elected. To their own misfortune, they were never chosen. As for the rest of us, we are the remnant that was prophesied. We are the returning ones who will inherit the renewed promised land for one simple reason. We followed the Torah of perfection, and we were conformed to the spiritual image and likeness of Yahushua Messiah. We eliminated every degree of lawlessness from our souls, and by the power of his spirit, we were made whole. This, my friends, is why the Most High, Yahuwah Elohim, has established his covenant with us, for we responded faithfully to the call to walk in the way of holiness. And when the time came for us to turn away from lawlessness, to examine ourselves against every one of these degrees, we were not disobedient. No, sir. We made our war with lawlessness the top priority. And once we gained the victory, we turned away completely and we never looked back. And when the nation entered the time of the renewed covenant and we were betrayed by our families and our so-called friends, we stayed strong and did not stray. And this is why he has established his covenant with us. For while others fell, we remained. For we chose to be pure while they chose to be stained. Preparations for the great distress. Now, I wish I had more time to cover the establishment of the renewed covenant, but I do intend to cover the final three events of the sealing in this podcast. Notwithstanding, I do encourage you to search the scriptures and see for yourself what Yahuwah has in store for those he has chosen. Now, this brings us to the fifth major event in this season and the marker for today. Enter the preparation for the great distress. As you can see by the timeline below, we are currently living this event. In June 2024 CE, Yahuwah is preparing the renewed nation for the great distress. It's happening right now. Before discussing this event, I would like to pose a question to the audience to ensure we are all aligned on the progression of each season in these last days. Now, here's the question. If we are living in the time of preparation for the great distress, have all the other events in this season concluded? The answer is no, for these 7 events are 7 signs, and signs are not equated to seasons. Therefore, one sign does not have to end for another sign to be manifested, a matter we clearly see in the book of Revelation. Along these lines, the call to walk in the way of holiness, i.e., the first sign in this season of sealing, persists. We prove this by analyzing the parable of the workers in the vineyard. See Matthew 20, 1 through 16. In that parable, spoken by Yahushua Messiah, there were workers who didn't show up to work in the vineyard until the 11th hour, i.e., the final hour. And these 11th hour workers received the same reward as those who came in at the beginning, who bore the greater burden and the heat of the day. Thus, we conclude the call to walk in the way of holiness is still being made. And yet, it is only being made to those who have enough runway. That is to say, not everyone is close enough to the goalpost to be elected into the renewed nation. Not everyone has enough time to turn away from lawlessness. This speaks to the second sign in this season. That is, the renewed nation's complete turn away from lawlessness. My dear friends, hear me when I say, yes, there is still time to turn away from lawlessness, but not for those who have plunged themselves too deep. Here again, this is why I will be spending the remainder of this year, from July 1st, focusing exclusively on the process by which we eliminate the 80 degrees of lawlessness from our beings. And as I have said from the beginning, this next phase will not be for everyone. Trust me, I won't need to weed anyone out, for those who cannot be saved have already fallen away. This speaks to the third sign in this season, the great falling away. Alas, this sign also persists. Brothers and sisters, we have not seen the end of the great falling away. We've lost many members of our nation, and we are about to lose more. And one of the primary signs by which we will lose them is sure. They are not preparing for the great distress, for they are as those in the days of Noah who perished with the flood. This brings us to the fourth and fifth signs of this season. Vis-a-vis, Yahuwah is preparing those who are under the renewed covenant for the great distress. As you may have gathered, these preparations are spiritual and physical in nature. And although I would have liked to have gone into them in detail, the Spirit has led me in a different direction for the following reason. Our preparations for the great distress are unique to the ministry Elohim has called us to. Ergo, the preparations Yahuwah has called us to make at Pinnacle of Holiness Ministries may not be the same as those he has called for other assemblies. For that reason, I would not broadcast the specifics concerning our preparations across this wide audience. Rather, I would simply encourage the chosen elect in every assembly of righteousness across the world to begin making those preparations if you have not already. This is in line with my office as a watchman, to wit, Yahuwah has called me to inform the renewed nation of Israel that we are living in the fifth sign of the second season in these last days. And all who will survive the great distress should be doing one thing above all else. Vis-a-vis, they should be preparing for that evil day as they are led by the Spirit of Elohim. For that reason, I encourage you to be engaged in effectual prayer and effectual fasting, and to live each day with an advanced level of spiritual focus. You must believe me, if you do not succeed in these three pillars of our faith, nothing else will matter. You will inherit the same fate as the transgressors. Alas, you will fail. And not because you pursued lawlessness like these defectors. Quite the contrary, you will fail because you did not become a master of your faith. This is why Hebrews 6:1 commands us, saying, let us go on to perfection. In other words, he is saying, let us become masters of our faith and let us not leave any of our works undone. Do this, and as far as preparations go, you'll know what to do. For the same word of preparation, he is speaking to me. He will most certainly speak to you. The call to flee mystery Babel. This brings us to the sixth sign of the sealing of these set apart ones. Enter the call to flee mystery Babel. Without controversy, this call will be one of the most important calls Yahuwah has ever made to his people. Here is why. From a physical perspective, Yahuwah will destroy the land of mystery Babel and all who are in it. It doesn't matter who you are or if you claim to have the seal. If you are in mystery Babel, when Yahuwah raises his hand to destroy it, you will die and you will not be saved. Here lies the inflection and the source of three key matters you must note concerning this sign, chiefly the destruction of all who are in mystery Babel. No doubt, this is a crucial matter, for there are more descendants of Jacob in mystery Babel than any other nation in our world. This is why it is critical for you to understand the concept of the remnant and the fact that not all Israel is Israel. And this we have already proven. Vis-a-vis, I have already shown you that we must be elected into the renewed nation of Israel. And those descendants of Jacob who remain in mystery Babel are those who failed their election. Alas, they were indeed called, but they were never chosen. This fact leads us to the second point. That is, not everyone will hear this call, but the renewed nation of Israel will hear the call. For this is the covenant he has made with us. This leads to the third point. That is, those who don't hear the call will stay. For why would they go? Who would relocate to a foreign land for the pure sake of relocating? Trust me, not many would, and neither will these. So don't worry if they don't leave. They aren't preparing even now. Moreover, it should be clear by now who is who. For many who will heed the call and flee mystery Babel have been preparing themselves for quite some time now. This is why we will be ready when the call is made, for we will have exhausted every care. For as the 5 wise virgins, we are taking oil with our lamps, and when the roll is called for his people to flee, we'll be there. The second great Exodus. Now, this brings us to the seventh and final sign of the sealing of these set apart ones. Enter the second great Exodus. Naturally, the second great Exodus will follow the call to flee mystery Babel. In that day, the spirit of Elohim will alert everyone within the renewed nation that the time has come. And we will move at a moment's notice, for we have been preparing for this moment for many years, and we've been waiting for this departure for a good portion of our lives. Although most of us who participate in this exodus will be leaving from Mystery Babel, many within the renewed nation will be relocating from other countries. Here is why. The second great exodus begins during the sealing of these set apart ones, but it will not end until season 6. That is the restoration of the land of Israel. Now, as you can see by the timeline below, there are 3 seasons in between the sealing and the restoration of the land of Israel. Look, these 3 seasons represent the time of the Great Distress. This is why the second great Exodus must begin during the sealing. It is for the following reason. Traveling during the Great Distress will not only be hazardous, it will be, in most cases, impossible. Remember, the sifting of the nations will be a macrocosm of 2020 CE, i.e., the year of converging crises. Along these lines, we will not only witness mass border closures, we will also witness total migration bans all over the world. Ergo, you will not only find it impossible to enter another country, in some cases, the country you are in will not let you out. Fortunately for us, Yahuwah knows this, and he knows where the few safe spaces in our world will be. And he is communicating this knowledge to his chosen elect even now. I know because I and many who are in our spiritual orbit have already been shown some of these safe spaces. And we are already in the process of relocating to these safe spaces. This, my friends, is the power of effectual prayer. Trust me, we're going to need it for the full duration of these last days. And as I always say, if you're not hearing the voice of the Spirit of Elohim now, don't expect to hear his voice when the evil day comes. Ultimately, this is the key to participating in the second great Exodus. Whether you are in Mystery Babel or some other land, you must be led by the Spirit of Elohim to a safe space. And you must be able to survive in a land that Yahuwah has preordained to survive the onslaught of the great distress and the rise of the man of lawlessness, aka the anti-Messiah, aka the Antichrist. For that reason, I call you to remember that Babel is not only a physical land, it is also a spiritual system. And the call to flee Mystery Babel is also a call to migrate off of the system. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, there will only be a few places in the world that will not be attached to the system. And we cannot be attached to the system if we are to survive. And this is why we must be led by the Spirit, for only he knows where we can survive apart from the system, and at the same time, avoid the natural and unnatural disasters that will destroy major parts of the earth. Now, there is much to say about these matters beyond this high-level overview I have provided. And these are matters we will discuss at the appointed time. And it will be soon, very soon, for the appointed hour makes haste, and we have no time to waste. For that reason, my plan is to eventually create an Exodus network with all the leaders and congregations who are following the voice of the Spirit and preparing to leave Mystery Babel as we are in the upcoming months. We must see how the remainder of this year unfolds, but I am not convinced that we have years left in this place. Notwithstanding, however long we may have, and whatever our unique case may be, we should all be rejoicing, for soon we will be free. For Yahuwah has set his hand again, a second time, to recover the remnant of his people from all the lands he has driven us and from the islands of the sea. Now, here is the final word. We all must flee. We cannot stay. And all does rest upon today. That is to say, your success tomorrow depends on the preparations you are making today. And this is why the word of truth declares, today is the day of salvation, today. Therefore, the slain of Yahuwah will not only include those who are oblivious to the times and seasons we are living in, having been deceived by the lawless one and being under a strong and working delusion of Elohim. Not so, my brothers and sisters. Many who will be slain by Yahuwah in these last days are not under any delusion at all. Rather, they are as the 5 foolish virgins. They know the bridegroom is coming, and yet they will not be prepared when he comes. Heretofore, the message of the hour is simply this: be prepared, my brothers and sisters, and hold on to Yahuwah's unchanging hand. For by his Spirit, he will lift us up, and by his Spirit, he will help us stand. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 288, the sequence of the sealing of these set apart ones, part 3. And the next podcast is entitled End Times 290, the truth about the Great Tribulation, part 1. I will post this podcast on Monday, June 17th, 2024. Until then, my friends, continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused. For the end is coming. The end is near.